Hey everyone, welcome to the Unlock Podcast. This is an exciting one. It is the first of 2025, which means it is the Monday of all Mondays. I know it's not Monday today, but that's not the point. It's the beginning of something great for all of you newbies out there, because I imagine with the new goals, everyone's set their 2025 goal to be to come and listen to this Unlock Podcast. We better take a minute and reintroduce ourselves.
It's a great goal.
Because it's an entirely new audience.
It is an entirely new audience, and hopefully both people that were listening have told somebody else, so now we're up to 4. All right. I'm Lars Johnson. I am in Alberta, Canada.
I'm Tony Hokinson in
Tony. Thank you,
Minneapolis,
Tony.
Minnesota.
Perfect.
I'm Chad Lingefeld in North Carolina. We're all completely different areas of the country. As a matter of fact, it's 50 degrees here today, guys. How about you?
In fact, it's actually 2 countries, Chad. Or the 51st state, I've just learned recently.
Where are you exactly?
In Alberta. That's northern Montana for you folks. And it is a little bit nippy here today, but more importantly, it is still the first week of 2025. We got new things happening. I'm excited. You can tell by my face. This is my excited face. That's Tony's just normal face.
This is my excited face.
This is my excited face. Look, taste the excitement. Tony, I'm going to ask you. You're a goal-setting guy. 2025, new things. What's the scoop? What are we talking about? What are we doing today?
So I want to talk a little about goal setting. You say I'm the goal setting guy. I don't know about that. It is something that I've been trying to be much more intentional about the last year and a half or so within our company. And this year I'm trying to do a better job of that personally. I realized about 3 months ago that I really didn't do much for personal goal setting. I focused on company goal setting and figured, if I'm going to be telling everyone else we need to be setting goals in our company, I should be doing it personally.
It's your goal
which
to
is
set
why
goals.
Yeah. Which is why I reached out to you guys a
Nice.
couple months ago and said, hey, let's get together once a quarter and let's set some goals. And you guys can maybe try to hold me accountable. I don't know why I asked you guys to do that, but it's a start.
Well, really a fountain of knowledge. You're just here to drink from us. So you're welcome.
Yes. I think as you said it in the past, I'm here to learn from all your mistakes and do better from it. So
Drink from me, Tone. Drink from me.
That's just a fountain of knowledge. You can drink from it.
Anyways,
good.
I've learned in our company that a lot of times without goals, you don't have a clear direction of where you're going. And it's really important for us as leaders to communicate that vision of where we're going. A lot of times we have it in our head, but if you aren't writing down the goals, people don't know where they're going. And as we started talking about goals within our company, people were always like, oh, goals, we don't want to set them. They have like such a bad connotation to them. But even recently, we've realized that without having them, people don't know what is being worked on. So it's really easy to say, hey, we just want to sell more. Okay, great. What are we doing to sell more? What does that look like? And I found it to be very important.
It's going to get better.
Yeah. I found it to be very important from me to communicate to our leadership team what's important for us from my point of view, but also getting their point of view. What do you guys feel is important? It's a good communications tool to make sure that everyone's on the same page, make sure you're going in the same direction, and also make sure that progress is being made. For us, we'd sit down in a meeting and be like, oh, what's the hot topic to discuss today? And we'd talk about it. And then next meeting, completely new items. And then everything would be, shoved aside and become stale. So the goals really help focus what we're working on for the quarter, making sure that we're actually making progress. I know that a lot of listeners have heard of the book Traction, and they talk a lot about rocks and pebbles and all sorts of stuff. But
they don't talk about
really
pebbles.
That's the entire premise of the book, too, by the way. It's just
not pebbles.
It's about rock climbing.
It's not pebbles, but I'm aware. Anyways, I do think that goals really help with gaining traction, and not to have a pun there, but it is really important to make sure that you're moving forward, make sure you're communicating what is important to you, what is important to leadership, what is important to the team, having a clear alignment along what is important, and then making sure you're making progress on those. So
Tony, so real quick, just because I want to interrupt you, and it's always fun. Do you have an example of the time in your company where you set a goal and it actually increase some motivation and drive towards something? So like a real world example. You don't have to give us all the specifics, but a real world example. Here we go. We set this goal and it changed a trajectory or got us in position where we were trying to achieve something?
Unfortunately, no, because I think we've done a poor job of goal setting.
Well,
So hold on.
Nice.
I can explain that. It's
Oh.
actually something we're trying to
Do
do
you
a
want
better
to think
job of.
about it for a few minutes and let Lars share an example? Because he'll just make something up real quick.
I got something. No,
No, he's
I'm
good.
good.
Okay,
I'm
here
good.
we go. Pins and needles. God, this is a
No,
good start.
I don't have a good example, but I'm going to explain why, and I think hopefully people can learn from this. Okay, so historically, when we've done goal setting, it's been like all about like what process improvements do we want to make, what sort of like initiatives do we want to conquer, what do we want to be focused on, and we haven't been specific enough, and I think that's why we've failed to gain traction. And that's one thing this year that we're trying to be very intentional about, is providing clear, tangible goals and try to make them more metric driven. Like we've always created scorecards.
Less is more.
Yeah, put metrics on scorecards and this and that, but we haven't done a good job of having a consistent theme around things. Like I know, Chad, you've done different ones with openings and gross margin and stuff like that, and we have failed to align our team around a very specific goal. So this year, our goal is actually, right now, it's a little broad. We're working on refining it here in the next couple of weeks, but it's to improve our communication. I recently reread 4 Disciplines of Execution, and in that book, they talk about wildly important goal and having a central theme that you can rally around. So for us, they don't talk about pebbles, but good job. Good joke. Poor joke.
Sand or something. I don't know.
The 4 Disciplines of Execution talks about having a wildly important goal and one central theme to rally your team around for the year and make sure that all other goals align to that. So for us, our wildly important goal is going to be increase our communication. We're going to measure it at the beginning of the year and track it on a monthly basis through surveys and such to make sure we're improving that communication. And then we're going to make sure that other goals align to communication. So we'll see if that works. But
hopefully by the end of this episode, maybe you can. I'm trying to say this in the nicest of ways possible, but hopefully by the end of this episode, you'll have a little more emphatic definition around improving communication. Because I still think I like the direction that you're headed, but I still think it's a bit broad.
See, maybe that's a nice goal for 2025 is just nice feedback, right? That was nice feedback. I was just going to say, Tony, goal.
So, okay, I was trying to speak more like Lars and be pretty vague, but our goal is to improve our communication score from X to Y by the end of the year. We have not measured the X yet, so I don't know the Y, but I will have that to you here in a couple weeks.
There you go. Okay.
So,
that was a great example.
It was just
Chad,
I know when I hang out with you guys, my attention to detail tends to lack a little bit. You guys rub off on me a bit.
And see, sometimes I don't really care about details, but on that particular thing, I wanted to dive into it and just review as much as possible. So I appreciate you explaining that. What were you going to say, Lars? Because I
was going to toss it to you. I wanted to, because I know you guys you're pretty good at this. I mean, I don't say that often, but this is actually something that you're pretty good at. So I was wondering if you maybe wanted to explain a little bit. What are you guys focused on? What are you focused on?
Well, so, very much in line with kind of the conversation, getting it down to a number. And I think the hardest part that I always struggled with goals and putting a number in there is oftentimes I shot too high where I was trying to get to. And I'm living this world. And, if you bounce back to a couple of episodes ago where we talked about culture index, close enough is good. I actually was having a conversation with a guy about this the other day. So if we were to say we wanted to get to 100 and we were currently at 50, then if we made progress and got to 95, I call that a win. That's great, right? We went from 50 to 95. What I learned with my team and with an organization of people, if the goal was 100, if we didn't hit 100, it was a failure, and it was a colossal failure. And I was going, we made progress.
We got 45. That's pretty good.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So as part of that goal setting, I've had to try to learn how to temper it a little bit to say I'd like to grow here, but also what's achievable and what is like kind of that minimum or where we need to be, and then anything over that is even excellent.
Is that like the good, better, best scenario where this is
and having kind
MVP.
of like a target and then a stretch goal, those types of things. But where from an example standpoint of where it kind of aligns the team and actually gets an impact. So there's been two major things, and I'll give them to you in two extreme situations. Number one has been in our sales department. One major thing that I felt we were really bad at was follow-ups. And that means we were really good at receiving an estimate proposal, getting it back to the customer, but we weren't really good at following back up to, one, ensure that they received it, and two, follow up any questions, clarification, retweak, rescope, whatever. So we measured it for a 3-week period or a 4-week period of how many follow-ups we were actually doing. Yeah. And then we set a standard of what we were trying to get to, which is 100 follow-up calls per week. So, and now we are averaging in that 395 to 400 follow-up calls per month, where we were previously doing about 85 total as a company. Wow. Now that's real numbers. And what it has done is when you look at any target, you have this introduction. And so our approvals seemingly sunk for the first period because our attention went to follow-up calls. Then once we got into that rhythm, they came back up. And so that was a real thing. We didn't have a target, and so we weren't achieving anything specifically with follow-up calls. We were not doing them consistently because we didn't have a target to go after. So once we identified and established that, then we were actually able to go after that goal. And then another one that I was going to share was with our driving score. So,
sorry, Chad, before you get into that one.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
How do you communicate that?
Which part?
Follow-ups. Because I know you're big on visuals, you're big on graphics, everything's green and goofy looking, but how do you communicate that your target is 100 or whatever you just said? I wasn't really listening.
It comes in two steps. One, there's a weekly meeting that the sales team has, and they actually, as they put in, so in our system and our software, they track, they put in that I made this follow-up call, I did this, blah, blah, blah. And so it automatically counts that in the back end, and then
entering into a CRM of some sort.
Yeah. And then on Friday, which again, I wouldn't get too lost in the technical side of that, because you can literally just mark it down
on a wall. Right. Okay.
And then they report that on Fridays, every Friday, because each individual salesperson has their own number of follow-up calls that they're trying to achieve. And then I report holistically to the company when we have our monthly business meeting, a chart month over month of follow-up calls.
Okay. So they have a sales meeting on Friday, I think I just heard, and then they all self-report their own numbers. That goes into the big kitty that you then tell everyone this is as a company, right? So it kind of, it doesn't, show to anyone out specifically. I assume that's why you have everyone self-report, and then you report the whole thing.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Rather than
that small team is accountable to each other. That the sales team is accountable to the company for the amount of follow-ups and approvals, obviously, that they're trying to achieve.
Right. Because that's ultimately the goal, is probably more revenue, right? But this is one of those, indicators.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So another goal that we were working on, another specific goal that we were trying to achieve from X to Y by when, was a driving scorecard. So all of our vehicles have GPS on them, and they track certain elements of the vehicle's movements. And so we were able to put together a criteria of scorecards. Again, I don't want to get too far in the details of it, but it's like, fast acceleration, harsh braking, stuff like that. Hitting speed metrics and all these things. And it culminates that in a score of 0 to 100.
Right.
And so the goal that we came out with for a company was we wanted to average our overall scores above 95, and each individual contributor had to be above a 90. They could drop below a 90 once, but then they had to correct it and get back up the next week.
So that one confuses me, because I don't think that has anything to do with your business. So why did you decide that one's important?
It has a lot to do with the business, because one, accidents create downtime. It increases insurance cost. And we want to, at the end of the day, our entire business, we want our employees to go home the same way that they came to us. So we want them to go home safely. So we've interjected safety metrics inside of that.
Okay.
But the reason was we had told people, so going back to, I think this is very practical, going back to, we have told people for years, you got to drive safer, be better, right? And we were constantly harping on that, but we didn't have a way to know if it was actually working or not. And in fact, the only way we knew is increased accidents or speeding tickets or whatever.
Right.
So once we put that metric in place, we report on that every single week. It's automatic.
Okay.
Scorecard goes up. Our safety, our driving safety has drastically increased.
Mm-hmm.
Drastically increased on it. I was knocking on wood. Just
yeah, we got that. That was
because there is a focused attention on we had to increase that score to a certain number. And if all of those elements are true, then we're driving safer.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with, specifically going back to the sales one a little bit, but any of these goals and tracking them? Sometimes you hear people you tend to get some pushback of, oh, I got to go through these steps to track this. And, oh, I don't want to track this. I just want to make the follow-up calls. Why do I have to follow this process? Why do you need to track me so closely?
Mm-hmm.
What have you done to you hear that all the time, no matter what you're tracking, right? What have you done to kind of communicate the importance of that and overcome that?
Well, I would say the biggest thing that we try to do, and we're not perfect with it every single time, when we start to set out tracking a goal, we look at what's the amount of involvement that's going to be required to automatically track it versus the value of doing the thing.
Right.
And so a lot of times we track it manually first
mm-hmm.
to see if it's going to work. If it works for a period of time, then we go through the process of figuring out how do we create an automation around it.
It needs a material impact before you invest a whole bunch of time and effort.
Yeah, and at the end of the day is figure out a way that it actually just lines in with their natural workflow so that it is an inhibitor is really the big thing. Lars, do you have an example of putting a target out there and seeing an actual outcome improvement?
No. We usually just blindfold ourselves.
0 for 2.
Blindfold ourselves and, hope the... No, you know what? We just went through. Actually, it was with you guys. I just went through our company's goals, and I had a revenue target, I had a gross margin target, and I had a cash flows target. And I used some predictive measures, accounted for inflation, and counted for some historical. If you're new to goal setting, and I think a lot of people will be. At least to good goal setting. I'll talk about my process a little bit. Sorry, my process, I think is how you guys say it down in Weird World. The process that we use is I usually will look at the last year or two, sometimes a 3-year average, but I will effectively use that. Plus, we can account for inflation in products that we sell. I know those are going to increase by 3 to 5%. So I know that means at a retail level, that's probably about a 10% increase. I know that in our industry specific, it's usually your minimal or your, what's the word? The thing that restricts your growth. It's your limiting factor. That's the word I'm looking for. It's 2 words, close enough. But the limiting factor usually comes down to labor and manpower. Mm-hmm. So, you can do that and figure that, each person is going to likely produce this much revenue. A salesperson will do this much. In my area, a salesperson's probably between 700 and $1 million, depending on experience. But I use these metrics looking back at the past and use that to predict where we're going. And then use that annual goal. So last year, our annual goal for Calgary Lock and Safe was a $12 million performance. So I was able to look at that, $12 million. That's a nice, easy number. So it should be about $1 million a month, $3 million a quarter. And we keep track of that. And then what it also does as well, what you'll learn when you're doing this goal setting, especially for financial metrics, is while you're setting these goals, you're kind of going through and, quantifying, giving it the sniff test to make sure it works. You also start learning a whole bunch about your business. Mm-hmm. Like when we were diving in, the 3 of us sat on, a call for a few hours last week and just went through our numbers and figured out, and, we realized that the companies were all pretty comparable in what we were doing, but there were little tweaks here and there. And it was interesting for me to see that, oh yeah, you guys, our cost of goods is a little higher. So that means to me, okay, either we're not selling hardware for enough money or we're buying it too expensively, or, there's something there. But, finding that a benchmark, looking within industry comparables, things like that, it gives a lot of insight. So as well as, setting a goal for where I want to go in the future and kind of a predictive, and I guess why am I setting that predictive, is to understand what we're going to have for budget, what we're going to have for real dollars that we can spend on goals going forward. So, it's goal setting to me is, I don't want to say it's a misnomer, but it's only part of it. It's really a reflective exercise as well.
Mhm.
And I know, what I'll even throw it to you guys. When we sat together last week and we fumbled through the Google Sheets and all that stuff and watched Tony change every formula in the history of the world.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
if you remember that day, yeah. What came out of that session with the three of us? Was there any big golden nugget?
I had
So-
several. But I wanted to ask you this question before you answer that. Is
Okay.
He
did
didn't like your question. He's like, no.
no,
turn
I,
this around."
did hitting those targets that you had set out for this past year, because that was one thing that you noted in that review, is you hit a few of the targets that you had set out. Not that you need it, but does it boost the self-confidence of one, what you think can be done next year? Or and if you convey that to your team, which I know you will, do you think that boosts their confidence that they can achieve stretch for next year?
I got a hint of smugness in that question. However, one as a business owner lets me know that I'm not completely full of crap.
Yeah.
Right. And there is, in all seriousness, that's something as business owners that's, reassuring, because a lot of the time we're just hoping we know what we're doing. So that was one. Two, I think that it gave my management team in general a level of confidence that, we set out and set a realistic goal that we thought we could achieve. It wasn't going to be easy, but we put in a bunch of effort, and we had an offsite back in January of 24. We spent 2 days together around a table planning and figuring out. Anyway, all of that came to fruition. And I think the management team collectively kind of looked at each other like, are we actually good at our jobs? Like, it was that reassurance that we're all as humans just looking for. So yeah, ironically, on my side personally, I'm not wired that way. Like, I was like, hey, I looked at it. Oh, cool. We hit our goals. Good. What's next? What else? And I know that's a downfall or a downside of, my personality, but, yeah, I think the answer is it was really reassuring and really helpful for my team. I myself, I'm already on to the next.
Sure.
You had asked about last week and kind of our conversation and what our takeaways were from that. To me, it was interesting to hear what you guys were focused on. Like, I had in my head my ideas of what I need to be focused on. It was interesting to hear what others are focused on in a similar position.
Do you remember what they were?
Yeah. Do you want me to share your goals with everyone?
Well,
that got awkward.
Well,
I mean, I'm not going to rattle off here.
Well, I mean, we're revenue goals. I think we all had our own revenue goals are based on growth. Yeah. Like, specifically, I don't think it matters all that much what the numbers were, but what were the focuses?
Yeah, the high level, like there was
so the focus,
revenue,
we were talking
gross
about revenue
margin.
growth. We were also talking about like different business initiatives we were focused on to propel forward. For me, it was related to facilities. For you, it was related to different business units you were starting up. For Chad, it was related to growing in different territories. Like, it's just interesting to me to hear what you guys are focused on. I know when we did this 2 or 3 years ago, Chad had talked about how he wants to grow into other locations, and at the time, that was something I'd never thought about before. Mainly because I didn't think it was possible, because we might, I don't know how I would do that. And Chad kind of explained, here's our goal. Here's what we've communicated to people. And by communicating this, here's what we've learned. And here's what people have come to us and said, hey, we want to do this. So to me, just hearing what other people in a similar position are focused on is really helpful. But then also, as a business owner, I don't necessarily have somebody holding me accountable. So that's why I reached out to you guys and said, I want to meet on a frequent basis just for some own accountability. I mean, we kind of talked about that with personal goals, whether it might be decreasing your golf handicap or getting in better shape, like having a group of people to share your goals with and help hold yourself accountable. To me, those two things are very beneficial.
I think you just referenced that my goal was, because I think every single day is the new fattest and laziest I've ever been. And so I think my personal goal for this year was to reverse that.
Yeah.
That every time you see me, hopefully it's not the new low point of my physical. Oh, it's not going great so far, guys.
Well, you only got a couple days under your belt. So
yeah, as far as, business specifically, Tone, what what was your area of focus for 25? What were you looking at? I think you mentioned increasing communication.
Yes.
But if we're talking about even just revenue, are you looking for 50% growth, 20% growth? Was there anything specifically? Like I'm thinking about our industry peers that are going to be listening to this. Was there any specific areas of the income statement or balance sheet that you were looking to focus in on?
Wow, you really threw me a softball there. We are focused on efficiency this year and increasing our bottom line net profit margins. We have grown revenue a lot year over year, added people, added processes, and with that, sometimes added confusion to things. So this year, we're really focused on, again, communication and processes and making sure that we're streamlining our operations to increase the bottom line net profit margins. That's our big focus for this year and what we're trying to drive with the ultimately communication and efficiency. So
yeah, I know our industry, you're going to see generally between about 9 and 14%. That's kind of your typical profitability. That's that. I just
Chad's over there sending text messages.
Yeah, he's probably just ordering more coffee. But yeah, so you were looking at increasing bottom line.
Yeah.
Do you have you looked into it yet? What strategy? Is there anything specific on the income statement? You're talking about costs, you're talking about wage, you're looking at operating expenses, increasing revenues. Anything specific you were looking at? Or
you pretty much touched on all three of them. For us, or any really locksmith or security business, probably any service business, the three major things you can impact are revenue, cost of goods sold, and labor expense. Those are the three biggest things on any P&L statement. So for us, it's those three things: making sure we're charging the right price, making sure we're buying at a good quality, good price, and then also making sure we're using employees efficiently.
Chad, you're chomping at the bit here.
One of the big things that you had mentioned was increasing your recurring annual revenue.
Right, RAR.
So yeah, RAR. That's a specific target. The reason I bring it up is it's a specific, because we can talk about increasing the net profit, net income, EBITDA, revenue, all that type of stuff. One of the factors to be able to achieve that, you believe, is to increase your annual recurring revenue.
Correct. So we track our reoccurring revenue. We call it reoccurring annual revenue, or RAR, or also we look at reoccurring annual margin, so RAM, not to be confused with the computer RAM or the Dodge RAM. But so we track our RAM growth year over year. Our goal is to increase our RAM added by 10% year over year. So if we added $100,000 in RAM this year, next year we want to add $110,000 and so forth. So that way we're continuing to add more RAM and at a higher rate.
Well, the reason that I bring that up is it's a very specific target that then you can take and execute down with the sales team or whoever is going to influence that. And the way that I see a lot of these things from a traction standpoint, keeping things moving in a general direction, is to say, okay, well, if that's true, so let's just use blank numbers to make it easy, because I think you said just now 10%, but on your paper document you said 15%. But so if you had if you had 100,000,
so actually the goal that we have set as a team was 10%. I actually want to see 15%, so that's why I wrote down. I set a stretch goal for what you guys.
Sorry, Chad, you weren't talking, were you?
No, but we could go back to the top of making it specific and clear. But anyways, so 100,000, you're right, is where you're at, and you want to increase it by somewhere between 10 and 15%. So that would be an additional $10,000 to $15,000 this year. So then at that point, just because it's just simple math, you can start to break that down on a monthly basis. Now, all this does, and this is the thing I talk to our team about all the time, a good target, a good goal will drive action and accountability. So for simple math, you said somewhere between 10 and 15%. Let's go with 12. That's 1% per month. So now we have some easy numbers, $1,000 a month that we want to try to add. We can measure that easily. And we can also know specifically what actions need to happen in order to get that $1,000 a month in RAR or ARR or RAM or whatever acronym that you want to use.
Yeah, a simple acronym like RAM.
Yeah,
because that doesn't confuse anyone.
But this is what it comes down to, really. When you talk about getting businesses to be on track and measure progress, if a target should do those two things: create action and accountability.
Yeah, and you asked 20 minutes ago if there was a measurable that we had tracked that had helped gain traction.
Oh.
And we
He got there. All right, let's lay it on us, Tone.
You finally brought me here.
Well, we just wanted to give you some
the
time.
reason I didn't answer with this one is because we did a very poor job of communicating and doing those items around that goal. So we set the goal at the beginning of the year, and we said we want to grow RMR by 10%.
Yeah.
3 quarters later, we followed up. Here's how we're doing. 3 months later, here's how we're doing. We didn't do anything on a weekly basis to make it prevalent. We didn't say, how are we doing? What do we need to do differently? Chad, you've talked to me a little bit about how you run your sales meeting and just said, if something is off base, what are you going to do this week to improve that? And that's where we failed. And that's why it didn't rally people around the goal, because we didn't keep it prevalent.
Correct. And that's the hardest part about goals. You personally, if a lot of people get those health goals in place and then they die off. I think the statistics that I heard in a book the other day is 12 days or something like that, and it is completely
February 2nd is the loneliest day at a gym. I'll say that. Yeah.
So
not that I would know, but I mean.
And a big part of that is if a individual doesn't have accountability associated with it, or there's not specific things that you're measuring on a regular basis. I know Aaron Beaver, who edits this podcast, his son, just recently completed
very, very laborious job there.
Wow.
Yeah. Completed 365 days of running at least 1 mile a day. So he's a part of an accountability group. So this was a target that he was trying to achieve. All it was is running 1 mile per day. Now, there were days that he ran more than that, but at least 1 mile. And they tracked it in this group for over 365 days. Now, that is a target that drives action and accountability. And he stayed on track with it because he had a group of people to hold him accountable. It was simple to measure, so it wasn't overly complicated. We didn't have to put in a massive reporting structure for it. It was just literally, yes or no, did I run a mile today?
Yeah.
Boom. And you get the progress.
I almost need a moment here just to comprehend I'm not great at math, but a mile a day, that's almost 365 miles.
And it actually was, I think he did the math on it because they actually tracked all of the miles, and it was well over, I think, 650 or 700 miles for the year that he ran.
They basically ran to Canada.
That's 750 miles more than 3 of us ran combined.
That's fair. But the point of it is,
I've seen you run when you have to pee, Tom. Maybe not the point of the podcast, but Chad, I think you were getting to something here, were you?
Yeah.
It's the action and accountability. It was simple, right? So oftentimes as business owners, we try to make this overly complicated thing, or we go with way too many. All right, well, I need to do 53 push-ups and run a mile, and I need to drink, 4 gallons of water, and.
Yes.
Well, now, if I miss one of the 50 that I've set out for the day, it's a failure, and I don't want to do it tomorrow. So simple, progressive, and it's working towards an ultimate end goal that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I think it's, we maybe haven't touched on it, but maybe I'll ask you about this, Tone. I'm not sure what the proper term is, but I'm going to make one up here and call it chunking. We're going to chunk a goal. Not what I've been doing every day for the last 35 years, but I mean,
so
having a goal, and I think you touched on it earlier, Tone, but we were talking about, okay, we want to hit 10,000 or whatever, 10% growth. And then we look on December 31st and say, how'd we do? Right?
So
that doesn't work. So what is your strategy, or what's going to be your strategy for this year? How do you chunk it up so it's in more manageable, smaller steps?
So I learned this from another book called Measure What Matters. It's all about OKRs, objectives and key results. And the key results are kind of those chunks. So if your objective is this, what are the stepping stones you want to hit to make sure you're making progress towards that objective? So like you said, manageable steps. What are the processes you need to, like, what are the things you need to do? What are the action items you need to do to hit this goal? And when do you want to have those done by? And then you can very easily see if someone's off track. So if my goal is to add 10% more RMR this year, Q1, we want to reach out to 20 customers. Q2, we want to follow up with those customers. That's a bad objective, but whatever. That's what that might look like. So
how about this? Because this is going to be a common thing. What if all right, I'm going to set my goal to be, I'm going to eat 40 cheeseburgers a day. I realize after about 3 or 4 days, this probably isn't going to work. At what point do you do you guys change these goals? What if you know the goal isn't going to work? How do you
say
handle
your
that?
goal is to eat
That's
40
that's a bit
cheeseburgers?
counterproductive to your goal of being healthier, but hey.
Glad we're on the same page here.
Absolutely. So I think it's really good to make sure that you're adjusting your goal along the way if need be, or at least evaluating it. Did we set the bar too high, or are we doing something wrong? And if so, adjust it accordingly.
I
And
disagree.
Chad disagree.
I
Let's
want to
go.
disagree because this is terrible. Here's the thing: you adjust the goal too many times, and the goal doesn't matter. So we need to do 100 things this period of time. Oh,
Mhm.
well, we didn't do that. So we're going to try for 90 next time. No, what do we need to change in order to get to 100? So,
But
yes, there is a
what if you realize
evaluation.
that eating 40 cheeseburgers a day is not possible?
The 40 cheeseburger thing really is kind of throwing me off because if you ate 40 cheeseburgers a day, you could achieve that goal, I think, one day.
But
And then
no, but
it
seriously,
wouldn't.
what if you just set a goal that you're like, this is not realistic? Or for example, we set a Q4 objective this year to
Or an
roll out
Well, I'll give you an example, a real life example.
Mhm.
I had a target to hit 18,000 openings serviced in a period of a year. I based that goal off of bad calculations, and
Mhm.
as we were progressing through it, we missed that target every single month on the progression. We were hitting our revenue targets and our
Mhm.
margin targets and all those things, but we were missing the number of doors. To which I figured out why, because the calculations were off. I had
because you
to,
did them yourself. So
yeah,
that
mostly.
makes sense.
I had to roll that goal back 10 months in,
Yeah.
and no goals mattered at that point for the remainder
Right.
of that year because everything was flawed. So
Right.
I just would say, in a word of caution, validate it, but also simplify it, because that was the big thing that I learned
Right.
from that is it was the wrong target to measure. So I
Right.
had to reassess, and I had to eat crow, set myself up on the next year of how we were going to change that,
Mhm.
and then maintain consistency with it.
interesting.
And
That's good.
that maybe
That's a
maybe
good.
ties into where I was talking about the sniff test is making sure that this goal
Is that
is
the
accurate,
chunking?
because
Is that chunking the sniff? I don't.
chunking sniff test, like I've already said, people should just drink from the fountain of knowledge here, but chunking and sniffing, um, the sniff test, that's important. I think, Chad, you just touched on something that's also something that we need to consider is when we do set these goals, we need to validate them. We have to sniff it out and make sure, because you just said, okay, we want to do 18,000 openings. Well, it turns out 18,000 openings heads us down a path that's not getting us to the end goal that we want, right? So because there are, one example I would use is, okay, we want to increase our sales on site. Like traditionally they call it upselling.
Yeah.
Well, that, as it turns out, had a negative impact on our scheduling. And we actually disappointed more customers because we took longer on sites, and we didn't prepare for it in our scheduling. So it actually, as we increased that, it actually caused more mayhem.
Yeah.
So we had to readdress that, but that was because I didn't sniff it out well enough and predict or think about what the most obvious thing that's going to go wrong, what it would be.
So, Chad, I'm curious on when you changed the goal, is there a chance that you maybe didn't communicate effectively why you were changing it? Like, it seems to me that people just didn't understand why it was changed. I mean, there was a very logical reason. It was just not reachable, not obtainable, and you reevaluated. To me, it seems like people would appreciate, hey, we realized we made a mistake. We realized this wasn't obtainable, so we adjusted to something that is obtainable.
Yeah, there was a lot of explanation. There was a lot of
Okay.
explanation around it. It was, and to answer your question, was it ill explained? It's high probability, based off of previous conversations. The big thing was it devalidated all of the goals for that year because it was not a goal at that point. It was because it was changing. So I guess the point that I would go at there is, as you're defining it, simplify it and make sure it actually is measurable and that it is going to hit back to the action that you're trying to gain, or the outcome that you're trying to gain.
We had a different example where it was not numeric based, but more of a progress goal, and that we did change. So our Q4 objective was to roll out a commercial locksmithing marketing promotion. Through working on that, we realized that we actually wanted to pivot the strategy because the strategy no longer applied. So in that instance, it was effective to change it because we didn't want to just say, we for sure want to go down this path. We have to go down this path. No ifs, ands, or buts. We changed that strategy and plan to do something different. So in that instance, it was effective. And that's kind of was the example I was thinking of. And that's a really good input on the fact that if it is a numeric goal, adjusting it, especially if you're adjusting it too frequently, can lead to negative outcomes.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the key there is, I probably sit somewhere in between where if we are constantly changing it, that doesn't sound like a goal. That sounds like it's just reporting.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is, we haven't really touched on this, and I'm not sure we need to necessarily, but it's certainly important to consider what are the impacts of not hitting the goal. If we set a goal that is instantly not attainable, and you recognize this early, and for some reason you didn't sniff it out, it's almost deflating or demotivational. Is that the word? Unmotivational? Whatever the opposite of motivation is.
Yeah.
It's that. So, that was in that instance, I think that's where you do have to evaluate and probably make a change so that it's attainable. If you want to spend a minute and Google SMART goals, I don't think we necessarily need to get into that, but SMART goals at least gives you an effective structure on how to set it.
Yeah, and the simple thing on that, the SMART goals is an entire philosophy. The 4 disciplines of execution, I think, sum it up in one statement: get to from X to Y by when. Simple formula. Where are we at currently? Where do we want to get to? And at what point and time frame do we want to do that? And if you can dial almost any goal down into that simple statement, it's easily digestible. And I know we need to get to kind of some takeaways and thoughts and get this thing wrapped up. The one thing, Tony, that I would also say a failure on our end that we've had multiple times is if the goal changes too frequently, you're also at setting up your team for disadvantage because it's hard for them to remember it. So
digestible. Yep.
Yeah, like
portable.
You live in it every single day. That goal. You work in that goal. You report on that goal. You change it. It takes us 4 months before our team really is clicked in with the target. Now, if I changed it every quarter, the likelihood that anybody knows what's going on is minimal. So just a caution there on getting the work done correctly. If you have to reassess it, be conservative, and then you can move it up. So,
and that's I think just wrapping into a close here. I was just pulling it up on my phone because I think for people like me, if you're you tend to have a bunch of balls in the air and you got a lot of things going, it's easy to get distracted. And that's the number one thing that's going to kill goals and targets is trying to do too much. So for me, I just put it on my phone. You can see it right there. That's literally our goal for our company. It's on the screen of my phone. So every time I open my phone, it sits right there and stares at me. And so that's only a few hundred times a day I look at this. So that was my little hack and my little trick on how to just keep myself focused on the one goal. I'm going to give me one takeaway. Give me one goal for yourself personally and professionally, because we're going to have this on the record, and then we're going to go back and we're going to look at this. And I've already said I'm trying to be less lazy and fat. So I'm going to have to maybe quantify that a little bit more. And I'm going to go on the record and say my big goal for this year is to end of life our operating software.
Ooh.
All right.
That is 2025. We are going to end of life our operating software. Write that down. You heard it here.
I like it.
Piece of cake. Either of you, lay it on me. I'm going to write this down.
My personal goal is simple. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I want to get back to reading physical books a little bit. I want to read a physical book 10 minutes a day, at least 5 days a week. Small. Actually, I think it was 10 pages, 10 something. I don't know. At least 5 times a week. I want to read a physical book in the morning.
10 minutes per day, I think, is what the document states.
Yeah.
So a business goal. Oh, did you get your business goal?
What's business, Tom?
Business goal is improve our communication score from X to Y once we measure it by the end of the year. So
Gotcha.
Mine is going to be grow our sales team by 50% by the end of the year. and my personal is to get my golf handicap down to below a 10.
Oh God,
Yeah.
below a 10.
I'd love that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Do you
You
know
should
how
have a personal
handicap
goal
works?
of like beating Lars and I at least once this year gross.
Okay, yeah, sure. That'll work. I mean, I beat Lars a few times net, but that's really irrelevant.
I don't remember that happening. But okay, so we've got our goals. I'd be very curious to hear what others are doing.
Yeah.
What is this? This is actually going to be a cool little thing. If we can get some engagement, drop it. What is your goal for 2025? Drop in the comments so we can check in on you.
Great idea.
Because I think we've amassed a bit of a little following here, and I know we're having some interactions with some people that are checking in. I mentioned this morning we actually had somebody asking me, "Hey, when's the podcast drop?" And I was like, "Oh, well, yeah, it should be this morning. It was yesterday, but that's a minor detail." Hey, this is the first of 2025. It's the Monday of all Mondays. Super excited. Are you guys ready for this?
Yeah.
Chad, I'm looking at you.
Let's go crush it.
Woo.
I'm excited. I know, Chad, you're just freshly coming off a birthday. New you, new year. Let's get at this.
Yeah, we all are. We just all completed a birthday. Big time.
Another trip around the sun.
Yeah, it's wild.
Oof.
Goal complete. Good job, guys.
We did it, and I'm really concerned at what Tony just hit a few minutes ago. That was in his studio there.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll work on that.
No, I threw a.
Doesn't matter, Tone.
Yeah.
Bring us home, Chad. What are we doing next?
Check it out on unlockedpodcast.com. Make sure you're subscribed. As Lars just mentioned, we do release a new episode every Thursday morning. When you wake up, it should be ready to go on Apple, Spotify, and a video version on YouTube. So that's always fun if you want to see our mugs. So next episode, Tony, we changed this order. So this one's about goals and targets. What are we doing for our next episode?
It's a great question. Great question. I have a couple ideas. We need to refine them. We've talked about talking about target markets. I also think we could potentially do one on budgeting that jives with kind of the first of the year, but we'll have to figure that out. Budgeting is, I know, a little bit of a
that's an
dry
exciting topic. Let's have everyone sit around and talk about
it could
budgeting.
be helpful. I like target markets, but we'll see.
Target markets or budgeting or financial reporting. One of those.
I think you mentioned this last episode, but people drop stuff in the social media feeds. What do they want to hear? What do they want to hear us talk about? That would also be helpful as well. So
yeah, just text Tony and tell him what you want us
perfect
to talk
wonderful
about, and the fountain that Lars will be.
Drink from me.
Yeah, that's weird. See you next time.